Instead, I will be defending Caleb Williams. Now, our good brother Caleb Williams, for those that don't know, which I don't know why you'd be listening to a sports podcast, which is mainly about football if you don't know who Caleb Williams is, but whatever. Number one quarterback prospect, arguably the most generational best quarterback prospect to ever live. Essentially Mahomes 2.0, except he's a lot more efficient already coming out of college. Great quarterback. Unless his arm falls off, he will be the number one pick. A lot of you have gotten really weird with your critiques of Caleb Williams. I clocked it early because whenever the number one quarterback prospect is a black man, it always gets weird with the critiques. The only exception was with Bryce Young, and the only reason Bryce Young didn't get the weird critiques was because the number 2 and 3 quarterback prospects were also black. So you couldn't criticize all three of them for the weird critiques. Oh, Kevin, you're just making stuff up. You're making everything to be the race card. Okay, first of all, the history of number one overall picks being black quarterback starts with Michael Vick in the year 2000. Starts. The NFL is over 100 years old. And the first number one pick as a quarterback was 23 years ago. That already starts it there. Coming out, oh, he doesn't have the skill to read NFL defenses, work ethic, all the buzzwords and dog whistles about Michael Vick. Let's take it 11 years later. Cam Newton came out, and I don't know if you guys remember the Cam Newton Sports Illustrated cover when he was on there with Jake Locker and Blaine Gabbert, and the title was "You Choose the World's Hardest Decision." I'm pulling it up right now, which is why I'm currently not looking at the camera. If you're looking at it on the video, it was "You Choose What a Tough Decision." Blaine Gabbert and Jake Locker, I don't even think started a 10th of the games Cam Newton did. And Cam Newton is one of the greatest college football players to ever live. MVP, took a team to the Super Bowl where his best receiver was me. Like, Cam Newton's awesome, is what I'm trying to say. Lamar Jackson won the goddamn Heisman. They tried to make him play everything but quarterback, and he was a pick away from not even being a first-round draft pick. Need I go on, or do you get my point? So naturally, Caleb Williams started losing some games, and everyone wants to jump on his case and start blaming him for everything. But I'm here to add some context. Caleb Williams has lost 6 games his entire career at USC. I'm going to run through those 6 games for you. Ready? If you're watching on the video, a nice pretty little graphic I made is going to show up on the screen. If you're listening through audio or you're just not looking at the screen right now, don't worry, I got you. So Saturday, November 4th, they lost to number 5 Washington 52-42. How did Caleb Williams do? 27 for 35, 312 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a rushing touchdown. That's pretty good. They lost to Utah, 34-32. Caleb Williams was 24 for 34, 256 passing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, no passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But if you watch that game, you know it was a lot of drive down to the goal line, run the ball in, and things of that nature. They lost to Notre Dame. No excuses here, other than the offensive line for USC did not bring their big boy draws for this game, so rightfully they got smacked. But that score was 48-20. Caleb was 23 for 37, 199 yards, 62.2% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, sacked 6 times, and I believe he fumbled once as well. Not great. Not a great showing from our guy. Lost his bowl game last year to Tulane, 46-45. 37 of 52, 462 passing yards, 71.2% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. Pac-12 championship against Utah, lost 47-24, 28 for 41, 362 passing yards, 68.3% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, sacked 7 times. And then the first loss to Utah last season, 43-42, 25 for 42, 381 passing yards, 59.5% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, sacked 4 times. In those 6 losses, his defense gave up an average of 45 points a game. And how did Caleb do in those games, you ask? How's 328 yards on average, 68% completion percentage, and a touchdown to interception ratio of 12-5. Come on now. What more do you want? What more can this man possibly do? Like, come on now. And a bulk of the criticism is he gets the comparisons to Mahomes, which if you watch the film and watch him play, the comparison's clearly there. But everyone's comparing him to Mahomes now that we see year 7 or 8 into the NFL. But if you compare him to Mahomes in college, it's night and day. It's not even close. We're complaining about 6 losses for Caleb. Patrick Mahomes was 13-19 at Texas Tech, didn't even smell a Heisman. But the way the game has progressed now, we see a lot of those Mahomes traits in Caleb, and he's also more efficient, and he actually wins games. So these scouts are not making this same mistake twice. They're going to get them a Caleb Williams. They're going to make that happen. Speaking of scouts, though, I heard a couple concerning scouting reports, quote unquote, from some of these experts on Twitter, and I have to address them. Right. So after the Utah loss this season, the camera focused on Caleb Williams after the game-losing score that Utah scored, and it showed Caleb Williams' stone-faced, emotionless face on the bench for what seemed like forever. And the next day, all the headlines, oh, Caleb didn't show any emotion. He's already checked out. He's already ready to go to the NFL. All that nonsense, right? Okay, I firmly disagree, but no doubt, that's how you feel. I can't change your mind. 2 weeks later, he loses to Washington this weekend. He goes into the stands and cries in his mother's arms. Luckily, his mom was smart enough to put the paper over his face so we couldn't see him crying, but we all knew he was crying, right? Now he's too emotional to lead a locker room. How could he be a leader of men if he cries after a loss? How could he handle the emotions of an NFL season? Hey, yo, check this out. Caleb Williams went into that game with absolutely nothing to play for. He could tell the whole Pac-12 to suck his dick tomorrow, and he will still be the #1 pick in the draft next year. That's just facts. They already had 2 losses. There's no way they were getting into the college football playoff anyways, and more than likely he's not going to win the Heisman anyways with 2 losses. He was out there for shits and giggles and for the sake of his teammates, and he still cared enough about the game to cry in his mother's arms on national TV after the game. And that's a negative? You don't want that from your quarterback? I do. I want my quarterback to care that much. And then what really bothers me about that is you can't feel like both. You got to pick a side. You got to pick what side of the argument that you're on. And then there's the leak stories. And this is what really bothers me because media literacy is at an all-time low and it's legitimately affecting this 21-year-old kid's life. The story about how he wants partial ownership in whatever team drafts him was proven as false in July when Mike Florio first reported the story. But somehow a couple months later, these aggregate Twitter accounts, which if you don't know what an aggregate account is, it's basically one of these accounts that might as well be run by a bot that take little quotes and clips and little pieces of articles, tweet out one little sentence and put a little picture graphic at the bottom and maybe tag the person the article comes from. They almost never link the actual article, and because no one's actually gonna look it up and read, they just take that little quote on face value and they run with it. So one of the aggregate accounts tweets out Caleb Williams wants ownership, and all of a sudden the story starts to circulate again, and nobody cares about the truth when the lie is more entertaining. So now the subject of discussion is Caleb Williams wants to own a team when it was already proven as false months ago. And then the other story was he has a list of teams that he wants to go to. That never came from a reputable source. More importantly, it never came from him or anyone in his immediate circle. So more than likely, that's bullshit as well. But here's the kicker, right? Here's the real kicker. Let's live in fairy tale land, hypothetical land, and let's say both of those things are true. Let's say Caleb goes to Indianapolis for the draft combine day and says, I want partial ownership of the team that drafts me, and I only want to go to insert teams here. So what does that have to do with you in particular, weird college fan, that you work a 9-to-5 job? You have a CDL. What does Caleb wanting ownership of the team have to do with you? If Caleb wants a piece of ownership, that's a Robert Kraft, Mara family, Runa family problem. That's not a your family problem. Like, why do you care as an individual? What does that have to do with you? And trying to pick out his own team, if you're applying for a job and you know somebody that works at that job or has worked at that job before, and they tell you, hey, bruh, the culture at that job is awful. The boss is this. The workload is going to be this. The facilities, blah, 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 blah. Don't go there. Don't apply there. You're not going to take that job, are you? Well, in the scope of athletes, they don't have a choice. If they get drafted somewhere, they have to go. The only people who have the freedom is undrafted free agents. How does that apply to Caleb Williams, you might ask? Cliff Kingsbury is currently the senior offensive analyst for the USC Trojans. which is a made-up title for I'm here to help Caleb Williams out if he has any questions. Cliff Kingsbury was the head coach of the Cardinals, who before the season, everyone thought was going to end up tanking and end up being the number 1 pick. As it currently stands, they have 1 win, thanks to Josh Dobbs beating the Cowboys. Shout out to him. He also just won this week. We'll get to him later. But Kyler Murray's coming back, and I'm pretty sure he's not too keen on the idea of I'm going to go out here and lose all these games, so I got to go move and get traded somewhere else. Pretty sure he's going to go win some games. So the Cardinals are ruled out. But I bring up the Cardinals to say, if they thought that was going to end up being the number 1 pick, and Cliff Kingsbury knows it's some bullshit over there, which every other report has already said that the Cardinals facility has some bullshit going on over there. Go read any of the articles. Just look up Cardinals workplace practices and literally hundreds of articles will come up. You don't have to look very far. So if he knows this, why wouldn't he tell the guy he's working with every day that can possibly end up at that job? You see how once you take the actual athlete out and you start looking at them as a person, these things start to make more sense. And now let's bring the athlete back into it. If they end up going to a shitty job culture, they can end up getting hurt and physically maimed for the rest of their life. If I end up at a shitty job culture, I'm just gonna hate going to work every day. It's a very different dynamic we're dealing with here. But that's about it, man. That's about it. But my closing argument will just be simply this. If any of the critiques of Caleb Williams legitimately bothers you, and there are some that are valid, like, hey, Caleb, you don't have to be Superman every play. Sometimes throw it to your check down. You don't have to run out the pocket the moment it collapses. Hang in there, buddy. He says he's 6'1". He might be 6 feet tall with shoes on. I look at him, he looks a little small sometimes. Legitimate critiques. But if you're worried about some of the other things I named earlier, and it's, oh, he paints his nails, oh, he's this, oh, he's that, and your team ends up passing on him, and he spends the next 15 years busting your team's ass because he passes on him, good luck to you, because you deserve it.